Let's check out Water Ciel. So start off with Spirit of Water, just the draw 7 spirit. I got my trusty Sabrina here. And then we have Ciel level 1. He is going to give us the Servile Possessions Mastery. And then this will give you more attack later on in the game, depending on how many omens you have. You can start to swing for 7 in the late turns, but we'll get to that later. It is one of our win cons. And next up, we have Ciel Omen Bringer. So this is really, really good. I like using him in water a lot because when you draw liminal guides in water, you don't really have a good way to use them. But because water can also afford to take a little bit more time leveling up, you're just a more slow, control-y deck. You'll usually have 2 omens-ish for his effect, his on-enter effect, and then you can discard liminals and floating and get a lot of card value that way. And then again, because we are slower, you actually do get to use his lineage release ability every once in a while, which is really nice. I mean, it's a stronger version of draw a card. It is locked to a very late point in the game, but being able to choose what card you want to play, it's basically giving you a fake influence of a +1, and you're getting to choose that card instead of just drawing a random one off the top. So very strong ability. If you watch the live stream that I did of the Yeti Regionals online a few days ago, or last weekend, I should say, you can see me really getting a lot of value out of Ciel level 2. You can go check that out on our YouTube channel under the live section. It's a super long VOD. We recorded rounds 3 through 7 for you. I did play every single round. I didn't ID any of them. Rounds 1 and 2, I wasn't able to do live, but we did record them, and those will be up on our Patreon or YouTube membership. So join as a YouTube member or join as a Patreon, linked down below if you want to go see some extra gameplay with this deck. Rounds 1 and 2, I played against a water mirror match of Ciel and then a water crux. So very, very different gameplay than what we showed on the live streams. And then we have Ciel level 3. So this is part of our win con. His ability is incredibly strong. Every time an omen counter is put on a card, you get to deal 2 unpreventable damage to any unit as a spell. So this can clear off boards, ally boards that are trying to pressure you down. This can hit, a taunter that might be trying to, stalwart shieldmate or something in the end phase so that you can swing next turn. Or more importantly, this can just go face and just go 2, you can't block it, 2, you can't block it, right? And it gives you this inevitability of a win con. So there's also a lot of ways to put omen counters outside of just the level 1 Ciel ability, so you can do this more than once per turn. Very, very strong. Then we have Devouring Malice. This card felt okay in the tournament. I didn't bring it out too often, but it does have some. It's a very versatile card. That's a thing that you'll hear me say a lot about this deck profile. I'm not gonna go like crazy in depth about everything just because I'm still learning a lot of this myself, and Ciel is arguably one of the most complicated characters that we've ever seen in this game just because of how much utility he has. And so this card is really nice. It gives you a lot of options and can present really awkward gameplay with your opponent. So big fan of this card. A lot of people didn't know what it did either. So definitely look it up and yeah, learn it. It's an important card to know. Grand Scenario. This is one of our actual win cons, and I know I'm gonna butcher a lot of names, forgive me in advance, but so this one, because we can reserve pretty high cost cards, we have like Revitalizing Cleanse, Acquiescence, Tide Diviner. It's pretty easy to get to 10 omen reserve cost or greater within 3 to 4 omens. 4 is like almost guaranteed, but 3 even is possible. And so this is pretty easy to become a 4 attack weapon, and then with your Servile Possessions, you're also gaining probably 2 or 3 attack by the time that you're bringing this out. So you're swinging for 6 or 7, which is obviously very strong for just 1 floating memory, because we do usually have the extra floating in this deck in water. So very, very strong card, part of our win con, honestly. Then we have then we have Armoire. This card is unreal. So especially in a deck like Water, where you have a lot of utility pieces, you have, Song of Frost, you have negates with like Cerulean or Tidal Lock or whatever negates you're running. This card is just really, really strong. So being able to switch out your omens means that when you're milling in this deck in Water, if you mill a card that you want, like a Carter or something like that, instead of being like, dang it, it's milled, now I can't play it, like how, you know, Genbu is and stuff. Now you can go, sweet, I milled a card, or let me omen it in my end step, and then next turn I'll bring out Armoire, I'll put that card right back into hand. So really, really, really good card, so much utility. I could spend probably 20 minutes talking about that card, but we'll wait for maybe like a Patreon super deep dive intense video when I know this deck a little bit better. So maybe that content will be coming in a few weeks. Tariff Ring, you struggle with aggro, so you need Tariff. GCR is the Divine Relic of choice. You know, sometimes you just don't open up super hot. If you are playing like Acquiescing Rejection and they negate the card instead of letting you draw 2, now you're down a card and your opponent's down a card, but it can make your hand awkward. So having the GCR to recover that and kind of like get right back into the game. A lot of players aren't playing GCR right now. There's a lot of Looking Glass and stuff like that. And so it can help you kind of get this like card advantage early if you do find yourself in a situation like that. Then we have Backup Charger, classic water, you know, fracturize the power cell when it comes out, and you got a +1 right away with just a 1-card combo. Or 1 card that you need to draw from your main deck. Chalice of Blood, we're a 30 health champion with heal in the main deck, enough said. And then Nullifying Lantern. Genbu is a real threat to you with mill out because you don't win very fast. And so I wanted the Lantern in there mainly for Genbu, but obviously it's also good against some fire aggro decks and stuff like that. So that's the material deck. Let's go ahead and jump right into the main deck. All right, in the main deck, here is our Umbra cards. So we have 2 Carders. Unreal card, this is the reason that this deck can function so well. It might seem weird to run 2, but because we have so much draw and mill in this deck, like I said, we can very easily get them back from being omened, and so you can pretty easily like get it by the time that you need it, even with only 2 in there. And then we have 2 Sporel, same kind of concept here. This is really good to go along with our control water style and gives you that extra damage as well. You can actually rack a lot of damage to your opponent's champion with Sporel. Then we have 2 of a card that I wasn't really a big fan of. I honestly was definitely inspired by Sean playing this card in Ascent Taipei. Really started to see more of the value with it, and realizing that this is 5 damage for 3 really comes up in this style of deck where we don't have a lot of ways to push damage, and so sometimes just being able to like play Ombre and hit your opponent for 5 because 3 attack and then the Omen triggering with the level 3 ability, and then like getting back like a Song of Frost or something and just being like, okay, I pushed some damage to you, I'm gonna be defensive on my next turn, you know, like I'm gonna win this attrition war. So very, very nice card. Definitely, I definitely undervalued it at first, but it's growing on me a lot. Then we have 3 Dungeon Guide. So there's not 4. The reason is we are on 1 Heavenly Guide as well, because we do level up a little bit slower, and because you can get Heavenly Guide back with like Maximum. It's pretty cool. Like if you're level 2 and you know doing whatever, and then you pass your opponent and they DG up to 3. Let's say you milled and omened a Heavenly Guide early. Now you can bring out Maximum for your materialization and then swap a card for Heavenly Guide, play Heavenly Guide, and now you've just basically materialized your level 3 for losing 0 cards, which is really cool. And so the 1 of Heavenly Guide is more relevant in water, I think, where you're just getting like the random mills than it is in like Fire or Wind Seal. Obviously Fire Seal, you could like discard this, but your discards want to be focused at discarding like Advent or Floating Memory or something, whereas Water Seal, like just like milling cards is just like going to happen. And so like if you happen to mill this, that's like pretty nice. And because Water Seal takes longer to level up, the chances of you being able to Heavenly Guide after your opponent has Dungeon Guide are greater. So I like this split in this deck for now. Then we have 4 Liminal Guide. I've already talked about this a little bit, but obviously we have Mill. You can pair this with Primordial Ritual as an excellent turn 1 opener, and then being able to discard it from your level 2 and then Heavenly or DGing up and getting that card value back right away is really great. We also want that chip damage just because we don't do a ton of damage output, and so even the 1 attack actually does come up for us. All right, and then for this one, I'm gonna have to shout out Core TCG. You know, my boy Vegan really liked this card in Water Ciel, and he kept pushing me on it. I finally tried it and I decided it was actually pretty decent, and I was pretty happy with it throughout the tournament. I think 3 is like the perfect count. I would not go to 4, and you just like kind of need early game play, so I wouldn't necessarily go down to 2. But 3 Tide Diviner felt really, really great. You can pair this with Primordial Ritual to, you know, even if you play this on Spirit, you at least draw the card into hand and get that card back, and then you have a free Primordial Ritual target. So that way you Primordial Ritual, you use that floating right away for level 1, and then if you happen to mill extra floating or a liminal guide, then you plussed, and even if you don't, you still like went neutral no matter what. And now you have extra cards in your graveyard to immediately make omens and stuff, because that is a big part of this deck, is being able to actually make an omen every single turn. It can be a really big struggle point and is what led to some of the counts in this deck, just to be able to make omens. So this card is actually a lot better than I realized. And yeah, big shout out to Core TCG for putting me on that. Also, speaking of Core TCG, if you need any of the cards shown in this deck profile, you know, maybe not the fancy versions that I have, but if you're looking for any of the base ready versions, and they even do have some fancy stuff, make sure that you check out Core TCG, use code TRUE10 and you'll get 10% back on your order. So let's talk about a card that I love, Throne Keeper Bullfrog. So not a lot of water lists are playing this right now, which is really surprising to me. I was extremely happy with this. I think if you watch the stream, the live stream that we did, you'll see that this card comes up quite a lot for me. So definitely would be running this as a 4 of. And then we have 4 Primordial Ritual. Honestly, this card felt amazing in the deck. Now that Liminal Guide's out, you know, being able to Primordial a Throne Keeper, a Liminal Guide, a Tide Diviner, like there's so many good targets right away. You don't really use this in the mid to late game because with your level 2 and everything, you usually get enough float in your graveyard that you don't need to keep adding float. But as an opener card, this is absolutely fantastic. And then we have 4 Fracturize. I have 3 really pretty ones and 1 very ugly one. Fracturize, obviously still one of the best water cards. I'm not gonna spend too long talking about it. Really, really good card, water staple. What I will spend a little bit of time talking about is my 3 Storm of Thorns. So this deck profile that I'm doing is exactly the list that I was playing in the Yeti event. I am going to talk about some minor changes that I would make to the list post that event, now that I've had some time to think about that event more, and this would be one of them. I would definitely be increasing Storm of Thorns to 4 of. The card came up a lot more than I thought it would. I was only able to test like a handful of games before this event, and I didn't really test against a variety of decks. And so like Storm of Thorns just wasn't coming up too much in the things that I was testing, so I was like a little uncertain about it. But yeah, this card did absolute wonders. Being able to protect your Bullfrogs, your Frosthorns, like all your allies, like is really, really relevant. And then, you know, even just being a mini Resolute stand for your champion as well, that's giving you floating memory back, is just fantastic. So definitely would suggest going up to 4 Storm of Thorns. Then we have 4 Fractal Rain. This is the absolute card that you want to see in your opening hand. Being able to start this and then go like backup charger, you know, get some card value, and then like hopefully mill a floating for this for you to go into level 1. That's like a really, really solid play. Gets you up in a really good position. Or even if you like start this and then you just like hard level to 1 right away, having the Rain mill you a card every single turn means that you now are always guaranteed an omen. Even if you mill a float, I have sometimes omened floating memory just because it was important for me to get that omen card out there. And so the Fractal of Rain is basically saying, you know, hey, you spent a card from hand, but now it's on the board and you can always tap it. So you didn't really lose tempo or influence or whatever. But, you know, every single turn you're getting a free resource in the grave, which is really, really relevant for Ciel to make all those omens, like I said. So Fractal of Rain is an absolute must, and that's the card that you want to see the most when you are doing your opening hand. 4 Frosthorn, again, water staple, fits really well in the deck. Not going to talk about it too much. And then we have Acquiescing Rejection. So this is one of those cards that, again, it helps you get your omen triggers. You know, whether they're letting you draw off it or whether you're negating a card, you got like good value out of it. And then it just goes to your graveyard and then you can make it an omen, which is really strong. Not necessarily to like replay it or add it back to hand or anything, but just like getting your omen count higher is important. And yeah, this card is really interesting. It's a good opener, which is why I like it. You need good openers in this list. The list felt very consistent, but this is definitely one of the cards that like I really, really love in this list, but also like wish I could run something else. So, you know, maybe comment below if you think of another card that could fit this playstyle. Doesn't necessarily need to be a negate. I'm running this more so for a value card that is also like, that's the tricky thing, right? This card is a little bit defensive, it's a little bit value, and it's also a good starting card to see in your hand. And I can't really think of any other cards that fit all that criteria, which is why I'm on the Acquiescing. Even though I'm not necessarily sure if this would make the cut in the long run, maybe as like a 2 of or something, but the issue is too, running 4 is really nice because you'll see me do it in one of my stream matches against a suited deck where I went second, so I had 8 cards in hand. They played a pretty important ally, and so I acquiesced it. They didn't want to let it get negated because it was going to present a lot of damage, so they let me draw, and because I drew, I was at 8, I put 4 down and lost 1 from hand, so I had 3 in hand left, but then I drew 2, so I had 5. So it let me play the second acquiescing. And so running 4 is really nice because it'll let you play more and chain them, especially in that kind of scenario. But it's not a very good card. It's a very weird card to describe. I would definitely cut at least 1 for a Storm of Thorns. I think that's the first change I would make. Then we have Force Cerulean Decree. This is a card that I honestly was super back and forth on. I had been building completely different water CL lists that weren't as like water focused because you really have to have a pretty water intensive list to make the imbue on this card work. And I just like wasn't a fan of this in my testing, but during the tournament, this card was the absolute MVP. Every time I saw it, I was pretty much happy. So definitely would, and that's why like practice makes perfect, like you need to get as many reps as possible, playing as many events as possible, practice as much as possible, because definitely it opened up my eyes to how strong this card is, and I don't think I'd run Water CL without this card. Then we have 3 Refracting Missiles. The generic float isn't as necessary. A lot of the times you're just hard leveling to 1 anyways. And so, it's not the strongest effect in this deck. There's a lot better floating memory options, so we're not on a 4 of. Then we have 2 Mire Reparation. You're not gonna cast this card too often because you're not actually healing a good amount until the late game, which is usually not where you're wanting to cast 3 cost floating memory cards. So this is just as a 2 of. It's nice too because you can cast this in a pretty big stall out and then make it an Omen and then just like kind of keep like replaying it because you don't really like need the float in the late game usually anyways. So this can just be a nice card. Then we have 1 Revitalizing Cleanse. This card was pretty nice. I don't really know if I would up the count of this. I think it's a nice 1 of, gives you kind of a fake opener. If you're playing against aggro and they're hitting you for a couple of damage on their first turn, you just end with a Revitalizing Cleanse, heal off all that damage, kind of reset their turn, you keep your memory, so like, or you keep your influence, so it's decent. I like it as a high cost for omen making. That's pretty nice. You can really get your Grand Snare, whatever it's called, alive a lot faster. But yeah, a decent card. Again, like this is a very unique build. You'll notice that a lot of our deck building usually is 4 ofs and like 60 cards and all this kind of stuff. Ciel, I think you have a lot more flexibility and versatility where you can run a lot more of these like 2, 1, 3 ofs and all this kind of stuff and kind of build it a little bit more toolboxy. So that's the idea behind it. Then we have 2 Song of Frost, one of Water's best cards, and in CL, again, you can just kind of like repeat this over and over again. So really, really loved having that and made a huge impact on the deck for the tournament run. Then we have 3 Dredging Streams. You don't need a ton of floating early, so the level 2+ like is fine. It's definitely awkward. I'm not like 100% certain how I feel on this card. I almost would want to run it down to like a 2 of or something, but Water Diana did win the event. And so like, you want to have an out for cards like Weaving Mana Stream and stuff. I'm not 100% certain how I feel about it. It's a strong card. I don't know the correct count. It could be a 2 of, it could be a 3 of, it could be a 4 of. That's where I'll leave it. And then we have a very cheeky 1 of Stratagem. So part of the reason that I included this honestly was because it is open decklist for that online regional event. And so I knew people would know I have it and have to respect it a little bit, even though it is a 1 of. And so, cards like Safeguard Amulet, they might want to keep in their main and stuff, right? Like it changes how opponents are going to sideboard. It changes how they're going to play because if I do end up with a high floating count, which just happens sometimes, especially if you had a really slow start where you were controlling the opponent a lot and you got to discard like 4 cards off your level 2, which absolutely does happen. You might discard just a ton of floating memory and then like DG up, survive and stuff, and you can get to like 5+ floating in your graveyard. I feel like that happens like more often than you would think in this kind of deck. And so the stratagem just be like, hey, like this is another ender, right? Like this is another finisher, because you don't really have a lot of ways to end the game. This deck is mostly like toolboxy, like trying to adjust to what your opponent's doing, controlling them a little bit, and then just doing this like inevitable damage that they can't really answer. And that's kind of the vibe. So just having like a banger, you know, boom, like big bomb. So just kind of having like a big bomb like stratagem to make their plays a little bit awkward and just kind of like get them sometimes. You know, I played against Suited in testing and I was able to just win with a stratagem on Spirit because I just had a lot of float and defensive cards. And you know, that was a great way to like just kind of cheese out a win. So let's also talk about the sideboard. We have one DG in the sideboard. This was to swap with the Heavenly when I was playing against aggro decks because Heavenly's a dead card and you want to get to level 3 fast. And then we had 4 Resolute Stand. This was literally for Suited. Suited felt like a pretty awful matchup, but this is essentially just a time walk against them, and you get a lot of value the longer you play the game, so Resolute's just a really perfect card against them. I had 1 Dredging Streams in the sideboard, mainly just because there were a couple of like aggro-based cards that I wanted to cut from the main for more level 3 strats, so this made a lot of sense to sideboard, and I did end up bringing it in a lot. We had a 1 of Jianyu. Again, this was an open deck list format. I'm not sure if I would play this without open deck lists, you know, like at an Ascent or regionals, like an in-person regionals. But because I knew every card in their deck list, I felt like siding one of these made a lot of sense for this event. I'm not sure if it would stay in the list going forward. We had 1 Revitalizing Cleanse, just, you know, we needed to sideboard a lot of cards for aggro. There were a lot of dead cards, Heavenly Guides, Dredging Streams, all these other cards that were a little bit like too slow against aggro, and so I wanted a lot of cards to swap out and make my aggro matchup better in games 2 and 3. We had another Song of Frost. This was if I played against like a, you know, Rending Flames deck or Slice and Dice or something like that. Being able to see it earlier is really important. Even though you can use this over and over again, only running a 2 of in the deck list in the main was a little scary if I played against a deck that might do an early Rending or an early Slice and Dice that I wouldn't have had time to find those Song of Frost yet. So that's why there's another one on the side. This Storm of Thorns I would move in the main, like I said, maybe cut 1 Acquiescing Furt or something. 1 Carter in here as well. I would usually cut 1 Spirel for 1 Carter when I was cutting the Heavenly Guide for a DG for when I was playing against these aggro type decks. Being able to DG Carter is a incredibly strong move against them and can sometimes win you a game on the spot. Then we had 4 Regals. I didn't end up using this too much. I just didn't happen to play against Luxem or any like Regal decks or anything. You know, this was mainly in the side for if I saw that they side a really heavy Regal package, I wanted to bring in my own. Kind of just like the insurance against Regal. I would probably cut at least 1 to fit something else on the side, but yeah, not too many adjustments that I know right off the bat that I would make. The deck did feel pretty solid. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be one of the best decks going forward. I think some of my wins came from my opponents not really knowing what my cards did and not knowing how to play against me, which is definitely a benefit of Ciel right now. But as more and more people play the deck and as it becomes more common, you know, like that is something that will happen. But I also do think that Ciel takes a lot of practice and experience to play optimally, so maybe the Ciel pilots will be able to keep up with people learning how to play against the deck, and they will just learn how to play their deck better, so it'll kind of like even out. So yeah, we'll probably have more Ciel content coming soon. I'm a huge Ciel fan, absolutely in love with this champion. Some of my most favorite deck building and gameplay so far has been with this champion. So we'll have some more Ciel content, whether that's more YouTube content, that's more entry-level beginner like this one, just kind of explaining some of the basics, or whether it's the deep dives that you've seen on Patreon before and now YouTube membership. You know, a lot of like really high level, high quality, intensive, you know, deep dives and stuff like that. So some more Ciel content will be coming for sure. Thank you all so much for being part of our community. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.